we could learn a lot from nature if we got the right information. But unfortunately, a lot of the time we sort of pass on the wrong stories about nature. And sometimes it's as simple as, repeating something stupid that you heard and believed, like memory like a goldfish. And sometimes it's a little more complicated. See, sometimes a really large movie studio might make a movie about fish and base the entire premise around rubbish. And when that stuff happens, things get complicated. So, the following photos are all the same family of fish. There is a spine-cheeked anemonefish, there is a Clark's anemonefish, and then of course there is the famous clownfish. Now, all of these fish have a very similar lifestyle, and their lifestyle is really quite instructive when you're looking at coexisting in nature. But that lifestyle, that important, instructive, educational element of what makes these things spectacular, was thrown out for a movie. I'm not going to say which one, obviously. I don't want to get sued, but it's worth thinking about. See, the thing is, these guys here, they live inside a living organism. So the living organism they live inside, the anemone, is a stinging organism. It's related to jellyfish. And so every one of the wavy little finger-like tentacles that you see on these things is actually covered in stinging cells. And they have the ability to paralyze fish so that they can consume them with their little central mouth that they have. And these guys live inside that environment, which theoretically must be quite a hostile environment. But they manage to survive quite well because they're covered in a mucous membrane that the anemone identifies as basically itself. It can't tell the difference. And since you wouldn't sting yourself, because you can't paralyze and eat yourself, you wouldn't sting anything else that looks like you, so they are safe from stings. And once they are safe, then they live inside these things and coexist with these things in a symbiosis that is just spectacular. They aerate the tentacles, they clean things off the anemone because it can't clean itself. They protect the anemone from predators, the anemone protects them from predators. It's a beautiful little dance between two things. But the key point here is that they are living inside another living thing. So the environment is limited, the space is limited. And so you find with these things that most of the time there'll be a family of 5 individuals or less. And within that family, then, there has to be a regulated structure to maintain such a low population. So how they regulate their structure is a kind of common trick for fish. They use sequential hermaphroditism. So these guys specifically are protandrous hermaphrodites. Every one of them is born a boy. And they stay a boy for a certain amount of time, depending on the other fish around them, the environment around them. So when you find a family, then the family is tightly structured around this sort of population. So the largest one is the most important one, and that is a female, the one and only female. It's her home, theoretically. It's her space, and she rules the place. The middle-sized one you find will be a sexually active male. So the sexually active male and the female will be a reproductive pair, and they will make babies. Now, the little ones, they are all juvenile males. They're not sexually active. I guess the easiest way to think of them would be kind of like teenagers. They're effectively worthless to society for now, but hopefully one day they'll grow up and contribute in some way. So you keep feeding them and you keep them around, you make sure they're safe, and you just hope for the best. But that's how the family goes. Now, the teenagers, the juveniles, they're not related to the female or the male. Theoretically, there may be exceptions, but most of the time you'd have all of these fish would not be genetically related at all. So, when they lay eggs, then there's an important sort of part of the journey right there at the start, because the babies can't stay with mum and dad. Because what happens in this family is that there's just a constant sort of stepping up of the hierarchy. If the female should disappear, if she were eaten by, I don't know, let's say a barracuda, then the large male, the sexually active male, would eventually sort of pick up on that absence and would have to change sex into a female. Not by choice, of course, it just happens, that's the way their life goes, but would change into a female. And once that one was a female, she would then need a sexually active mate. So she'd select the largest, healthiest of the juvenile males, and she would start to incite cues into it to cause a a hormone production that would make it a sexually active male. And so then it would turn into a sexually active male, and the two of them could reproduce and have more babies. But if their own babies were to hatch out of the egg and stay with them in the family, then they would eventually end up being pushed into having sex with them. And inbreeding is not good for genetics. Not good at all. So it's heavily discouraged in nature. So these guys, when their babies are born, they actually swim away. First thing they do. So their father may help them out of the egg when they hatch in the middle of the night, but once they've hatched, the eggs these little baby fish, tiny little baby fish, will actually swim off huge distances. Some of them have been recorded, found, up to 400 kilometers away from their parents through the ocean, and they make this massive journey all by themselves. As best we understand it at this stage, they navigate largely by smell. They can smell their parents. They know that that doesn't smell right. They can smell other members of the same species elsewhere, and they know that that does smell right. And they will navigate through this huge, incredible ocean using a sense of smell, which is just incomprehensible. I want you to think about that for a second, right? Smell underwater. First and foremost, you can't smell underwater, and I can't smell underwater, so we don't know what underwater smells like. Secondly, if you believe a naturopath, water remembers everything that's ever happened in it. I don't know entirely how true that is, but if that were a fact, then that would mean that they would be able to smell dinosaur poo in the water, which is just cuckoo. But even if that isn't a fact, just think about it. The ocean covers 70% of our planet. Everything that happens on the land washes into the ocean, which means every time you flush your toilet, those chemicals, those particles, those molecules are all ending up in the ocean, which is then more or less unilaterally distributed across the planet, which means that these guys have to navigate through 8 billion humans' toilet flushes, let alone the showers, the chemicals, the nuclear waste, the rubbish that's in the ocean. Forget about that. Just 8 billion flushes. That's a lot of navigating by smell. It's crazy. So they do that. That's amazing. And then they find new families, join those families, and on they go. And all that stuff is really, really instructive, really amazing. It's actually, fascinating to think that such a complicated lifestyle could be inhabited by such a small fish. But most people don't ever bother to question it because they got shown a movie when they were young about these fish, and they think they know everything there is to know about them. Because why would a large movie-making organisation not tell you the truth? I don't know, probably because there's inbreeding in there somewhere, you never know. But yeah, they're cool photos. They're cool fish to be able to showcase. But obviously I had to take the photos where the fish were because you can't just pick up an anemone and swim around with it. So these photos were all taken out on the Great Barrier Reef at varying depths on breath hold. I don't use scuba for this sort of stuff. So yeah, just free diving down and taking these shots, which is why they're not always exactly perfect. But I'm pretty happy with them. Pretty happy to be able to showcase these amazing fish and just how cool they are. So there you go. Now you might have learned something new there. Who knows? Just keep swimming.